The night hung in a thick, suffocating silence, pressing against my ears like something alive. Even my own breath felt intrusive. Outside, a storm howled through the streets of our small town, freezing wind screeching, snow piling higher and higher. The world beyond the flickering glow of the streetlights felt like it had fallen off the map, lost to the storm. I was alone in the station, feet kicked up on the desk, sipping on some lukewarm coffee, trying to stay awake. The faint rattle of the old radiator was the only sound, a weak companion to the oppressive stillness that hung in the air. My shift was almost over, and the thought of crawling into my warm bed was the only thing keeping my eyes open. A pile of unfinished reports sat untouched on the desk, but they were the furthest thing from my mind. It was one of those nights when time dragged on, every minute stretching like an eternity. Then the call came. "Deputy on duty, report to Birch Hollow," the dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. Caller reported hearing screams. I froze, the mug of coffee halfway to my lips. Birch Hollow. Just hearing the name sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the storm that did it. Birch Hollow had a history, a reputation that ran deeper than the darkest corners of this town. Deep in the woods, the place was said to be cursed. People disappeared there. Strange lights flickered through the trees. And that oppressive, unnatural silence, it had a way of getting under your skin. Local legends had kept folks away for years, whispering about it around campfires, shaking their heads when they passed through the area. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed to ignore the call, to let someone else take the risk. But duty was duty. "Deputy Holt responding," I said, forcing my voice to sound steady even though my gut was telling me to turn tail and run. I grabbed my keys and flashlight, the cold of the storm already creeping in at the edges of my thoughts. The drive to Birch Hollow felt endless. Snow had blanketed the roads, turning them into a slick, treacherous mess. My cruiser slid and swerved on the icy surface, and the trees seemed to close in around me as I neared the property, their branches reaching over the road like skeletal hands. My headlights barely pierced the swirling snow, and everything else beyond the beam of light was a blur of white. When I finally got to the hollow, I parked the car at the edge of the overgrown driveway, killed the engine, and stepped into the storm. The house was barely visible through the storm, a silhouette of rot and decay against the darkened night. The roof sagged, windows shattered like broken eyes staring into an empty abyss. The air around the house was thicker, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. I felt it in my bones as I stepped out of the cruiser, the crunch of my boots the only sound in the world. The beam from my flashlight cut through the darkness, guiding me toward the front door. The closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The door stood ajar, creaking slightly as it swayed in the wind. It felt like an invitation, but not a welcoming one, more like a warning. Stepping over the threshold was like crossing into another world. A coldness, deeper than the storm, seeped into my skin, and a shiver ran down my spine. Inside, the air was rank with the stench of rot, as if the house itself had given up on life. The floorboards groaned under my weight, and my flashlight illuminated the ruin around me. Symbols were scrawled all over the walls, crude, chaotic marks painted in what looked like dried blood. Torn fabric, shattered furniture, clumps of hair, and small, gnawed bones lay scattered across the floor like forgotten remnants of something once human. "This is Deputy Holt," I called out, trying to steady my voice. "If anyone's here, make yourself known." My words hung in the air, swallowed by the silence. For a moment, the urge to leave, to run back to my cruiser, almost overtook me. But something held me there, a mixture of duty, curiosity, and the unsettling sense that I wasn't alone. That something was watching me from the darkness. I moved cautiously, clearing each room one by one. The kitchen was a nightmare. Broken dishes lay scattered across the counters and floor. A butcher knife was lodged in the table like it had been driven there in a fit of rage. The refrigerator door hung open, its insides crawling with black mold and something unidentifiable. The living room wasn't much better. Old photographs lined the walls, their subjects' faces scratched out violently. A rocking chair sat in the corner, rocking slowly as if someone had just gotten up and walked away. Then I heard it. A faint, rhythmic thumping, like someone pacing back and forth upstairs. My heart skipped a beat. I turned toward the stairs, the beam of my flashlight flickering as I made my way toward them. Each step creaked beneath me like a warning, the weight of the house pressing down. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched into darkness, doors hanging open like gaping mouths. The thumping grew louder, and I approached the last door on the left, my grip tightening on my flashlight. I drew my weapon, the cold metal of it grounding me as I nudged the door open with my foot. The scene inside was worse than anything I could have imagined. The bed was overturned, its mattress shredded, stuffing spilling across the floor. The walls were covered in spiraling carvings, patterns that seemed to writhe and shift when I looked at them too long. And in the center of it all, a figure stood, its back to me. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and impossibly thin. Its limbs were twisted at odd angles, the skin so pale it was almost translucent, veins visible beneath the surface. In its hands, it held a doll, old and tattered, covered in something dark and wet. My throat went dry. "Turn around!" I shouted, my voice cracking with the force of it. "Show me your hands." The figure didn't move. I repeated the command, louder this time, but it remained still. Its head tilted slightly, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, with an eerie, jerky motion, it turned to face me. Its eyes were hollow, empty sockets. Black pits that seemed to swallow the light. And then it grinned, a wide, gaping grin, its mouth stretching impossibly far, revealing rows of jagged, sharp teeth. The doll fell from its hands as it lunged at me, faster than any human should have been able to move. I fired without thinking, the gunshots echoing in the confined space. But they did nothing. The figure crashed into me, sending us both to the floor. Its hands were cold, like ice, clawing at my throat with a strength that wasn't human. Panic surged as my vision blurred. Desperation kicked in. My hand found a shard of broken glass, and I drove it into the creature's side. It let out a sound, a high-pitched, bone-shaking screech that rattled my skull. Its grip loosened, and I pushed it off, scrambling to my feet. I fired again, each shot tearing into its chest, but it didn't fall. It didn't even seem to care. Instead, it growled, a guttural, animalistic sound, and disappeared into the shadows. I didn't stay to see where it went. I ran. My boots slipped on the blood-slick floor as I raced down the stairs, the front door still hanging open. I burst into the freezing night, the storm biting into my skin, and didn't stop running until I reached the cruiser. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and fumbled for the keys. That's when I saw it. On the passenger seat, a small envelope. My blood ran cold as I picked it up, the paper damp and smeared with crimson. Inside was a single note, scrawled in jagged handwriting, "You're not done yet." I looked up. In the rearview mirror, I saw the figure standing at the edge of the driveway, its empty eyes fixed on me. I slammed the car into gear and sped off, the hollow vanishing into the storm behind me. I don't know what I saw that night, and frankly, I'm not sure I want to know. But one thing's for certain, Birch Hollow isn't just haunted. It's alive. And it's waiting. If you ever find yourself near those woods, take my advice, stay far, far away. And for the love of God, never answer the call.